go, Jim. He's dead.
Hello, I'm Stephen Cadwell, and you're listening to Improv Autopsy. This is part one of my interview with Phil Lusardi, member of the Herald Team Corky's Callbacks, one of the original cast and creators of Flanagan's Wake, an improviser on the world stage, and author/curator of the Substack Yes and Now What, which he describes as stories from a life spent chasing connection on stage and off, funny, honest, sometimes sharp around the edges. Phil was a delight to talk to, and I'm sure you'll enjoy listening to him as much as I did. Welcome to part one of Phil Lusardi's Improv Autopsy. Phil, I appreciate you joining me, and on the spur of the moment kind of today.
Yeah.
As well.
Improvisationally, if you will.
Yeah. So your bio and your Substack, you mentioned that you're not sort of actively doing improv at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of, I would describe myself as semi-retired.
From everything or improv in general?
Just improv in general. I still do odd jobs here and there, but as far as improv goes, improvisation. Here's my thing, man. I got this thing where I always, whenever I can, use the whole word because that was pounded into me by Dell.
Okay.
Because that's the thing, is like I have respect for both short form and long form. I really was drawn to the long form. And I drew like this delineation between improv and improvisation. So short form, long form, the full word.
Okay, sure.
Or short form, and I've done them all. So yeah.
Well, so then that leads me to where I normally begin. I just want to get that out there, so just for a little bit of context. But when did you first become aware of improvisational theater? When did it sort of get on your radar, and how did you get involved?
Okay, when I was in high school, typical class clown. I grew up just outside of Chicago in a town called Maywood. If you don't know Maywood, everybody knows Oak Park. Have you heard of Oak Park?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So if you're ever driving in Oak Park, you get scared and you're locking your doors on your car, you've accidentally driven into Maywood. And that was my hometown. So in high school, I kind of discovered I had this class clown tendency, and that was kind of a survival thing. They would call me Crazy Phil. And so I would just cut up, and that made me part of, crowds. So in high school, we had this thing where they decided one day that they were going to not read the announcements over the speaker because it was too institutional. So they gave sheets of announcements out to people to read, or to the teachers. And I was in an English class, and Dave DeWeese, Mr. DeWeese, would pass it around, and it would be different people's turns to read the announcements. So when it was my turn, I would do something which was kind of what I was watching on TV on Saturday nights. I did news and commentary because Saturday Night Live had just started. So I was like, I'll just do news and commentary. So I'd read the announcements and I'd make a couple of jokes about it. I got kind of good at it. And then one day I just fell into the trap of being inappropriate. I said something stupid and inappropriate. And Mr. DeWeese came over like a good teacher would, and he grabbed the sheet of paper and he said, "Sit down, you're not doing this anymore." And then after class, he said, "Look, you've got a natural wit and timing. There's a time and a place for this, but you need to tune your power." And he said the place to do it is a place called the Second City. And so he told me all about the Second City. So I started going, I jump on the L on the weekends and I go catch the free improv sets at the Second City. And I would just watch, and I was just blown away. And I was like, I want to do this. But it was years before I ever, took the leap.
And do you remember what it was that you said that was inappropriate?
Well, yeah, it was a sexual comment, just something about the volleyball team and the shorts, And so, and I mean, but what I learned later, here's the thing, right? Okay, maybe we're yucking about it now, but there's that thing where, I wrote about it on my Substack, playing at the top of your intelligence. Doesn't mean I'm smarter than anybody else, but there is a better choice to make.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that even at that level of education, like when you were in high school, that wasn't the top of your intelligence.
Yeah. No, well, high school it is. And then I got to tune it later,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you said it was years later before you took the leap.
Yeah.
Did you stop going to see the improvised set at some point?
Yeah. It was just a thing where in my neighborhood, I wasn't a theater kid, we didn't do theater. And, you got a job, you went to work, you did what you did. And then, it was tugging at me, but I really didn't commit. And then I ran into a group Well, I was aware of this group, so if you Google it, get your Googles ready. It's called Maywood Fine Arts now, but back then it was Stairway of the Stars Dance Studio. There's a beautiful couple, Lois and Ernie Bauman, who had this dance studio, and their daughter and I developed a little bit of a relationship, and I knew Lois and Ernie from years ago, and they invited me to come hang out at the studio. And what they did was they did these really cool dance recitals, and the dance recitals, if you've ever been to a kid's dance recital, the kids all come out on stage and they dance a little bit and then they sit down. Well, what Ernie and Ray and Mr. Bill and I did is we wrote a show around the dances. We'd pick a theme and then we'd write a show. And so now this is long before I've studied any improvisation, but what I was doing was improvising with these guys. It's like, okay, here are the dances. What do we need to come up with for a theme? We come up with a theme, we write a show, and we just do it. There was no thinking. There was no squashing of ideas. There was no, we can't do that. It was beautiful, man. It was a really neat time with some beautiful people. And then they empowered me to take a class. Like I was like, you know what? Let me go downtown. And there was a theater called Victory Gardens in Chicago. It was on Lincoln, right across from the original Potbelly. And there was a guy teaching improvisation. His name was Mark Nutter. So I took Improv 101, and it was, I never stopped. And I mean, it just tickled something in me. And then, wow, well, I guess you want me to ramble or you want to pause? I don't know. What are you thinking here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the story. So were there more classes at Victory Gardens, or did you?
So here's what happened. Okay, so like I said, my neighborhood there was no theater guys, but there was this one guy who had kind of busted through, and he had gotten a part in a film. His name is Kevin Wickstead, and he was an actor that got cast in a movie called Lucas. It was Corey Haim's first film, and Charlie Sheen was in it. Courtney Thorne-Smith was in it, and they filmed it just outside of Chicago. So all of these stars were aligning. I knew Kevin. He was on the peripheral of another friend group I had. And we kind of got to talking one day, and he's just like, Phil, man, you should, you could do, you got chops. You should check out theater or whatever. And so I'd been taking those classes, and then Kevin was like killing it. He went out to Hollywood, and I was aware of him being out there. So I started taking classes and auditioning. And then one day I get a call from an agency, and it was, they needed extras for a film that was being shot at Navy Pier in Chicago. And they said, can you play pool? I'm like, heck yes, I'm a really good pool player. They said, great, we need pool players to fill some scenes in something called The Color of Money. and so I showed up to Navy Pier, and I brought my own cue stick, and they put us all on tables, and they had us play some games, and they watched how we moved, and they could tell that I was a decent pool player. So they put me on a table. And if you've watched the movie, there's that big scene at the end with, I think, 28 pool tables. And I think only 8 of them were real and the rest were kind of prop tables. But I was on a real table, and I would play, and I'm cut out of almost everything. But there's this one point, if you pause it, I'm like, there I am. But I was like, man, this is cool. Let me pack my cutlass and go out to L.A. So total cart before the horse, total not know what I'm doing. Headed to L.A., knocked on Kevin's door. Kevin's like, hey, man, how are you? Yeah, here it is. Good luck. Yeah, that's great. And then I moved to a beach community, Hermosa Beach, and I got a job selling pagers and car phones. So I was like, all right, let me get established here. Let me get set up, and then let me go sniff around and see what this whole Hollywood thing's about. And from there, I discovered this place called the LA Connection. So the LA Connection was short form, very character based. It was outside of the Groundlings. So Groundlings was really super character based. I was aware of the Groundlings, but I auditioned for and got cast in a show at the LA Connection. And it was take suggestions from the audience and do really character based, fun. We did like one word scenes. We'd do scripts. We'd do fill in the blank, in about 30-minute shows. And then they had auditions for something called Mad Movies. And Mad Movies was a thing where we would sit in the front row of this big theater at the New Art Theater in Santa Monica. and they'd play an old vintage movie, and we'd sit in the front with microphones and we'd dub over the scenes. And it was half scripted. We would pretend like we'd be making it up on the fly, but we pretty much knew where we were going on that. But it was my first kind of foray into, let's do something collaborative and let's make this work. And I really started to get pulled by that yes and feel, that or lifestyle. And looking back now, I didn't realize that at the dance studio we were improvising. Improvisation was just starting to come to be a thing. And then I got out there and started collaborating and met some people. And then I auditioned for and was cast in the very first iteration of Second City Santa Monica. They let me into the classes. So Second City Santa Monica was around for a while, and then it abruptly shut down. And I was kind of sitting on an edge. I was like, well, I wasn't really digging Hollywood. I wasn't really my scene. I was really super cart before the horse. My buddy Kevin was doing great, but I could see that I had a lot more work to do. I wasn't really in the right place at the right time. But I knew Second City was out of Chicago. I'd made some connections through Second City. And actually, Ryan Stiles said, go back to Chicago and study there. And so I was like, I'm going to go do that. And so loaded my Honda, drove cross country back, and I immersed myself in everything. I got into the conservatory of the Second City. There was a theater on the north side called the Improv Institute. There was the Free Associates. Anything that had anything to do with improvisation, I was riding my bike across town to be a part of.
So that first improv class at Victory Gardens, that was before the move to LA in Santa Monica, etc.?
Yep, it was just a taste. They got that first taste, and then I was like, okay, I love improvisation. That was really cool. Get out to LA. Who's doing improvisation? Answered an ad in the paper. There's LA Connection. Started there, and then Second City Santa Monica pops up. Let me go there. And then I was like the home of Second City, and of course, I knew from going to the sets years ago.
Yeah.
So I was like, I really need to be back in Chicago. And so back I went. And I hit what I would call the golden age of improvisation. I think, so I've adopted this line, and I realize now that I think I stole it from a guy named Jay Leggett. Jay Leggett, he passed away a few years ago. He was on Mad TV, but he was part of an original group at Improv Olympia, which was originally Improv Olympic until the Olympics said you can't use that, until Sharda sued and got it back. But it was called Blue Velveeta, the group Blue Velveeta. You ever heard of them?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So Jay was part of Blue Velveeta, and they were the guys, man. I would go see that show, and those guys would get on stage, and I'm like, this is it. This is cool. I'm like, they would just hit every night. And so I was like, I like those guys. I'm going to go see those guys. Where do they play? And it was at this little restaurant called Papa Milano's on Armitage in Chicago. And so then I heard about this guy, Dell, who was teaching classes. And back then it was show up, pay a little bit, and you get to take classes. So I'm like, I'm going to take classes with these guys that are so good. But the line, hold on, let me get back to the line. The line I'm thinking about is Jay Leggett years ago said, before he passed away, he said, improvising in Chicago in the early 90s was like playing guitar in Liverpool in the early 60s. Kavish? Right?
Yeah.
So there was just magic happening, man. There were just people coming together. We didn't know it at the time. We were just doing stuff. But things were bubbling up, and everybody did something. You either sat and waited for Second City to call, or you waited all year for the Second City general auditions, or you grabbed a bunch of your friends and you did something. And you either did a play or a set, and it all kind of came out of Improv Olympic or Improv Olympia at the time when Sharna started putting the groups together. And I got put in a group called Corky's Callback. We were a house group, and we started performing Harold. And Harold was developed with Dell in the basement of Papa Milano's, and it was that long-form improvisation that everybody, I think, tries to capture and have put a bunch of rules around. But back then, man, we just did stuff. We tried stuff. It was edgy. It was experimental.
Yeah.
And it was magic. And Del would come into the basement of Papa Milano's and talk for about 10 minutes about whatever he was thinking. And then we'd jump on stage and do stuff. And this was in the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of this restaurant with them prepping for the dinner rush in the other room. And then that night, either teams would get up, and in the very beginning, Blue Velveeta would get up and they'd just kill. And then they moved to the Wrigley Tap. We moved that whole operation over to the Wrigley Tap, and that was where Improv Olympic really took off. And that was when I got cast in Corky's Callback.
So all of that was before the Wrigleyville space, before they had their own space?
Yeah, there was this other Italian restaurant. There was Chow. We performed there a little bit. It was right down the street. It was on Wells, right down by Second City. And then that place, we showed up one day to rehearse, and there were chains on the door because maybe the owner didn't pay his taxes or some damn thing. So Sharna figured out that she could get into Papa Milano's, so they were down at Papa Milano's. And I mean, remember, this wasn't a thing. This was fringe. This was not established. It wasn't like now where I have a team and I can find a place to go improvise. We were literally improvising and trying stuff.
Yeah, I feel like the scene in Chicago right now is a little more, it's not exactly like that, but it's a little more like that now, post-pandemic, since both Second City and I.O. have been sold, that there's a little bit more there's more opportunities, more places to do it. Than the big two are still there, and I'm glad they're still there. But there was a time when I was like, oh no, I think I'm going to live to see a Chicago without I.O. And, that was kind of sad. But then seeing everything that's there, even if that were to happen, we're not going to see Chicago without improvisation.
Yeah, I'll have to take your word for it. I don't keep my finger on the pulse as much of what's going on right now. So, hold on. There's a thing. There's a whole thing that happened. Okay, so Improv Olympics started. But again, there were sets all over town. There were people trying stuff. So Improv Institute was up on Belmont. And my dear friends, these are my lifelong friends now, Pat, Jack, Mark, Jimmy, Jeff, Amy, they would get up and we had this 100-seat house, and we were lucky to get about 30, 40 people, and they had a late night set. So I'd do my early, like 8 o'clock set. Whenever I was put on stage at Improv Olympic, I'd do that set. As soon as I was done, I'd run down, unlock my bike, ride over to make it in time to do the late set at Improv Institute. And then if Corky's Callback wasn't up at Improv Institute, then I would do Free Associates. And the Free Associates was super stylized improvisation. We did a show called Cast on a Hot Tin Roof, which was improvised Tennessee Williams one-acts. And then from there, we spawned something called Pick a Dick, which was Pick a Detective. And there was this lineup of detectives that the audience would pick. I played Mike Hammer. Darlene Hunt played a great Nancy Drew. She was great. Oh, Chris Hips. She was Miss Marple. And so what we do is we'd come out and we'd stand in front of the audience, and then they'd pick which detective mystery they want to see. And based on audience applause, if it was Mike Hammer, then I'd be the lead guy, and I'd come out as Mike Hammer. And it was a night like any other night, and I'd just go out and improvise a Mike Hammer monologue. And then we'd do scenes around that. And then if Nancy Drew was picked, I became Nancy's father. And so what I used to do is just float in and out of the show and go, now, Nancy, I hope you're not down there playing by the old well. Bite the pipe, And God, audiences just ate it up. It was fun. And so I do that. Then I go over to Improv Institute, improvise there. And then one night we had improvised this Irish scene where a guy was walking to try and get a pint, and the darts would go in his head. And he'd walk in front of the dart, and then the guy would go, Mickey, move sideways. I want to see where my dart would hit. And so the guy would move sideways to kind of hold his head up. That's a triple 20, right? So we'd improvise this Irish scene, and the same week Phil Lusardi, Yes, I'm Italian, had auditioned for Tony and Tina's wedding, only to be told I wasn't Italian enough. So I was like, what does that even mean? I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm Northern Italian. I'm not Sicilian, but there's makeup for that. But they said, no, we're not even looking at you. We don't want you. So I was like, God, yeah, that's weird. So we're standing around after the set at the Improv Institute, and we're all laughing about that Irish scene. God, that Irish scene was hilarious. The guy with the darts in his head. And so then, hey, Phil, how'd it go at at Tony and Tina's. I said, you believe this? They said I wasn't Italian enough. I'm a fungu. So then one of the guys standing there just goes, you know what we ought to do? We ought to do an Irish wake. It's a lot like an Italian food. And we looked at our watches, and it was February of 1994. And we realized if we got our shit together, we could have this thing up and running by St. Patrick's Day. So we began improvising Flanagan's Wake. So the way we developed that was like, okay, we got a dead guy on stage. He's a dead guy in a box. And everybody has a relationship. We just played the relationship to the dead guy. And so I just, because it's who I was at the time, I was his friend and drinking mate. I was his best friend and drinking mate, Brian Ballybunion. And then Pat was Fiona Finn, his fiance of 30 years. And we just played the Irish thing. And the first night, we advertised it. There was no internet. We pooled all our money together and we bought ads on the South Side newspapers. And they came, man. We had to do the first night we did 3 shows because they were lined up outside the block to see it. and we didn't have a script. We didn't have anything. We just did it. And then we started pulling out the stuff that worked. And yeah, so that was Flanagan's Wake. And that was part of that whole thing where everybody does something and then something pops out.
Yeah.
Right? And another example would be everybody's doing stuff, and then what popped out was Upright Citizens Brigade. Those guys were all at Improv Olympic, and they were doing that kind of guerrilla theater. Adam and Rick, God bless them, Miles, all of those guys. They were just all getting together. The Walsh brothers, they were doing their thing. My thing became Flanagan's Wake. Our thing, please. There was 8 of us that got together and created that thing. Yeah. Did you talk to Jimmy?
Yes.
Yeah, Jimmy Binns, he was part of that. So yeah.
And that's, in a roundabout way, how we found you.
Yeah, how'd you find me? I'm not out there anymore.
I talked to Jimmy. So we met Jimmy. We did the Conservatory in Chicago, and Jimmy is one of the judges that goes to Conservatory and judges. So that's how we met Jimmy. And so I chatted with him, and he brought up Flanagan's Wake. And Kayla and I just saw it in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
Because we'd talked to Jimmy about it, we'd read it, and never seen it. We want to see it. So it's in the 15th year in Cleveland. It was, I think, running all the time, and now it's just seasonal. That might be a post-pandemic thing. But anyway, we saw it there, and Jimmy was the mayor, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and Kayla's like, yeah, I can definitely see Jimmy in that. So we're like, let's track down whoever we can track down and chat with whomever, because is a very fun time. They're kind of in their theater or Playhouse Square, I think is what it's called. A bunch of theaters there in Cleveland. The room they have it in is like you go downstairs. It's kind of a smaller theater, but it's great for Flanagan's Wake.
Yeah. Yep.
It's brick walls, and it just it doesn't feel like a theater. It feels like you're somewhere else for this thing. So it's very conducive to that.
Yeah, I've traveled with that show. We were able to put it up in places, and it's funny because the space really does matter. Because like if you can get a little space that it feels like you're walking in, because you really are walking into, an experience. And we were very intentional in that if you want to play, if audience members want to come in and play, they can play. If they want to be left alone, you leave them alone.
Yeah.
Just let them take in a show. You can either participate or have a show. It was really cool. I mean, the audience interaction in that is probably some of the best work I feel I've ever done. It was just so fun. And we honed that and made it really a beautiful thing.
And in terms of that, I mean, I need to see Tony and Tina's. I've never actually done, but Flanagan's Wake is much more interactive than Tony and Tina's, right?
Honestly, I saw little bits and pieces of Tony and Tina's. They did it up here in Minneapolis. I knew some people who did it, but I had a little sour taste in my mouth because they wouldn't even see me for the audition. So like I said to them, so actually I got a call. It was funny because there was this woman, her name was Sari, and she called, like I was doing Flanagan's for like a month and it was on fire. People were just lined up to see it. I mean, we hit it just right. I mean, it was in 94, 95, that was the beginning of all things Irish in Chicago. Irish pubs were everywhere. The Irish community was, out and proud. And, we just caught lightning in a bottle. And so I'm doing this for like a month. And then this woman from Tony and Tina's called me. I think her name was Sari. She's like, Phil, we saw you in Flanagan's Wake and we think you're wonderful. We think you'd be great. And you're Italian. This is perfect. Come do Tony and Tina's wedding. I said, you guys wouldn't even look at me when I came to the audition. So I'm going to tell you what I told the kid sitting at the audition door that sent me away. A mafangu. And so I'm like, is that Italian enough for you? So yeah, I was like, that was kind of fun because I was like, this is our thing now. I don't need to do your thing. We did a thing.
Yeah.
And part of it, I mean, that's not the only story. Like mine isn't the only story. It was just like everything fell into place. We were all in the room and we all said yes. And Jack grabbed his pen. Jack Bronis grabbed his pen, and Jeff, who is Amy's husband, grabbed his. He's a tech guy. Check him out on Instagram. It's he's man behind the curtain. He does special effects for television commercials and stuff. But he made the box. He made the set. Mark improvised the most brilliant Catholic priest monologue that I believe I've ever seen. You know the monologue if you've seen the show. It's the Book of Kevin.
Yes.
And yeah. And so it just all came together, And my role, all I had to do was stand in front of the box, take the suggestion of how he died, and create a story about how he died. And the key was to make sure it was a cartoon death.
Yeah.
So it can't be, he can't really be shredded by a combine. He went to the football combine and got shredded by all the football players who ran him over. You take the word, twist it,
Yeah.
So you take the death and twist it. That's what I would do. So, yeah. And we did it. I mean, we do 2-3 shows a night, month after month, year after year.
Yeah. Do you remember any in the development of it, anything that you're like, oh, that was great, but it just didn't fit, didn't work. We had to cut it.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you about Sean Finn.
An entire character?
Yeah, an entire character. Sean Finn was a character that would take the stage. This was in the early days of Flanagan. Sean Finn he'd take the stage, and I can still remember part of his monologue, and it was played by Jeff. And Jeff's other stage show was called Dr. Boom, where he would blow up stuff because he was a pyrotechnic guy. So I remember one night he blew up a hot dog, fries, and a Coke. So he had this pyrotechnic thing. So what we did was Sean would get in front of the box, and it was Jeff, and Jeff would he'd improvise. Flanagan, if you ever needed something, say section of copper wire, 9-volt battery. And then the priest, Father Fitzgerald, would pipe up. What you be doing with that, Sean? Never you mind. So it was a play on the IRA.
Yeah, and
it was great. And so at some point, Jeff would start beeping. His something on his vest would start beeping, and it would start out, Sean, you're beeping. Sean, you're beeping. Sean, you're beeping. And he'd go, oh, Jesus. And he'd run off stage. And then there would be an explosion off stage. And then he'd come walking back in and he would be smoldering because Jeff had this stuff that made him look smoldering. He'd muss his hair and he'd put makeup on. And it was hilarious. But then something happened and we realized, yeah, bombing's not really that funny.
Yeah.
That's again, we were having fun doing it. The audiences were having a little bit of fun, but I think there was something that happened overseas that we realized that, you know what, this is a road we shouldn't go down.
Yeah.
And so we pulled it. And again, I think it came back. Once again, my primary tenet is playing at the top of your intelligence. We're not going to fight this just because we love it. It's like, hey, you know what, that's something maybe we should back away from. So we stopped doing that character. Yeah, we pulled that character right out.
It's an example of reality infringing on your art.
yeah, and just also like, yeah, maybe we don't need to do that. And it wasn't, and the other thing too, man, it was like, back at that time, it wasn't like, I'm offended. It's just like, at the time, I was dating a girl from Ireland, and she had this great phrase, because people would walk up to her and ask her about the troubles all the time. And this is what she would always say: you shouldn't fan a fire that should go out. And that was it. I'm like, yeah, don't fan a fire that should go out. And that's not what we were focusing on at that time, in that place, for that. And what we really focused on and what we really did to play at the top of our intelligence was play the characters, honestly, not caricatures.
Right.
Not being, leprechauns and blah, blah, blah. Right? It's, no, Jesus, we're going to commit to this. I'm really his dear friend, and I really miss him. He died, and this is very difficult. And I'm going to get up here, and I'm going to speak to him. And playing the reality, and then playing the reality of being connected to somebody who passed away, and then exploring and heightening the fact that how he died and how he lived was extraordinarily hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's a shared experience. And again, that gets back to like the audience discovers everything with you. Each night it's different. The way he dies, his life's dream, and the one place he wanted to go on vacation, and everything else forms around that. And when the connection is formed with the audience, that's when they really, that's when the magic happens, because it won't be the same show twice. Every time you see it, it's different. And I think that's the beauty in improvisation. Any improvisation is when you're in the room with the people and something happens and you're like, fuck, that's cool, right? That's that moment. And it's incredibly cool for audiences, and it's even more cool for those of us who get to present it.
Yeah. Another one of the differences I'd say, and again, I haven't seen Tony and Tina's, but my understanding of Tony and Tina's is it's more dinner theater. You were at the reception, you're at the thing, and so you're getting the reception food, you're getting cake or whatever, and it's more of a show done for you in that space. Whereas Flanagan's really is an experience that you're having with the cast, and that's such a different thing than, yeah, the cast is out here, but they're still doing a performance that they would do even if we weren't here. It would be the same.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I guess I'm glad you said that, because that's it. We created a theater piece, and the first people that started Tony and Tina's in Chicago had to join the Restaurant Servers Union. I'm not kidding. I was like, man, when I heard that, I was just like, oh man, am I glad I didn't take that gig? Because your whole life you're trying not to be a waiter, right?
Yeah. I play one and am one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But no, that's true. Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you made that observation, because you forget, and that's the other thing too, is when we were churning that out, when we were doing it, man, it was like, it never felt like a job, but it was a thing where I had to get there every night and get my energy up and do my thing, and we did everything. So there'd be beer bottles in the aisles between shows, and we'd clean, reset, do another one. You had the early show and the late show, and the late show was always rowdy. The first show was usually pretty measured, but we whipped those folks into a frenzy, and it was fun. And I remember one night, like, I tell this story all the time. I tell this to young people or anybody who'll listen, about the night that we'd moved the show to the Royal George Theater, which I think is hilarious because it's the Irish show at the Royal George Theater in Chicago. And we were in the little black box space upstairs, and we'd greet the audience downstairs, we'd guide them upstairs, we'd work them, blah, 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 right? Do the show. And then, so between shows, and we'd get pizza. I remember we'd get pizza between shows. That was always excellent. We'd eat in the green room. But between shows, you had to go in, clean up. So you get all the bottles, clean up anything that's left behind. And I was starting to burn a little bit. I was like kind of burnt out. And I was going there, and I remember there was this group at the top, the very top of the theater. And it was a family, and they had a little gift bag with balloons, because I remember seeing it throughout the show. And then when they left their little gift bag and one of the balloons in the back. And so for me, I'm like working my way up there, putting beer bottles in the bag. This is actor Phil, but also now I got to be the flipping janitor, and I'm kind of grumbling to myself, and I'm tired, And so I get to the top, and in the bag there's a little card, and it says, oh man, it says, to Mom and Dad for your 50th wedding anniversary, 2 tickets to Flanagan's Wake. And I stood there and I went, who the fuck am I to think that I should resent anybody in this fucking crowd? They came up out of their house. They paid money to come see this. This family, I'm sure they were a Southside Irish family. And they were like, you know what we're going to do for our mom and dad for their 50th wedding anniversary? We're going to take them to Flanagan's Wake. And I was like, that's it, man. That put the spark back in my butt. I'm like, that's an honor. I mean, if I do nothing else in this lifetime, I've got that.
Yeah.
And that's where I started to kind of commit to, hey, this is important. What we do is important, or can be, not is, can be important if we do it right. And so then I was kind of committing and still churning. So then from there, I've been doing it a while, and I had an agent, and his name was Mickey Grossman. And I went to Mickey's office one day, and he goes, Phil, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing Flanagan's Wake. He goes, yeah, I know. What else are you doing? I was like, well, I'm doing Flanagan's Wake. He goes, yeah, that's your thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's my thing. He goes, I don't have a thing with you. He goes, I need you to do more stuff. I can't keep bringing people to come. Because back in those days, your agent would bring people from like advertising agencies and stuff to come see shows, and they're like, oh, we like that guy. It was just a way of having some exposure. There was no internet reels or anything like that. And so the agent would bring, here's dinner and a show. This is my client. If you're interested in them, and you book stuff every once in a while, a commercial or whatever. But Mickey was just like, I need you to do some different stuff. So I started to diversify, go out, and it was hard for me to kind of let go of Flanagan's because it was our baby.
Yeah.
And so we would get understudies, and I'd go do different shows. And I tried doing some straight plays. And by straight plays, what I mean by that is plays with like words that are written down,
yes.
that you got to stick to. And so I'd audition, and then there were these people that were doing like, just like us. There was people all over Chicago doing scripted shows, and I auditioned and I started doing some stuff there. God, I did this one show. What was it called? It's called Waiting on Sean Flynn, which was this true story of Errol Flynn's son, Sean, who was a photojournalist in Vietnam. And he was captured and most likely killed by the Khmer Rouge. He was one of the first photographers to get embedded. He embedded himself. It was this really cool story, and we partnered with the Vietnam Veterans War Museum. And I mean, it was intense, man. It was not comedy, and I got cast as the lead, but I didn't have any lines because I was a ghost. I would walk in and out of scenes and just go, wow, trip. But I looked just like him back then. I had to grow a Zapata mustache, but I learned so much about the Vietnam. We partnered with the Vietnam Veterans War Museum. These Vietnam vets had donated some of their stuff for us to use in the production, and they got behind it, and they were, God, it was cool, man. And that's when I started to realize what theater can be again. Like, I didn't know, man. I wasn't a theater kid, and everything was comedy and fun and yuck. And then I did stuff like that, and you meet people that you're telling their life story, and it's like, whoa, we have the ability to do something really cool here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then you called Jack and Jimmy and said, guys, you've got to cut the Vietnam bit from Flanagan.
Yeah. Oh, no. That never made that, it was on the table for a minute. No, but, and then from there, that's when I auditioned for Disney Cruise Line. They'd come to town, and I kind of tangentially knew the owner of the Brave New Workshop because he understudied Flanagan at times. And he came up and he's like, "Hey, Phil, we got auditions. You got to come. You got to audition for this. You got to audition for this." And then I auditioned for that. And I think that was the beginning of when it got weird for me. Yeah, because what it was okay. So I was doing all this hip, slick, and cool stuff, and starting to realize what mattered and what was like important and what was cool and connected to stuff. And then I went to work for Disney, and it was just like, be funny now. And I was like, well, that's not really what we do. So I had this weird experience of going from hip, slick, and cool Chicago improviser playing in the fringes to now put on a tie and be mainstream and don't offend anybody. And I was like, okay, let me see how this works. and it was a rough entry, man. It was beautiful people, man. We had a really cool group, man. When I moved up here, I didn't know anything about Minneapolis. Maybe I heard Garrison Keillor a couple times, but I didn't know anything about it. But when I got up here, I met everybody at the Brave New Workshop and that original cast, and what a great bunch of people. And man, we had tough times because we had these scripts we had to learn, which were like, we do sketches and improvisation, and then we'd have to, host different things. So we were months from starting our shows, but Disney had us under contract, and we had to rehearse 8 hours a day. So we were rehearsing improvisation in empty rooms for people that didn't exist. And the director, this guy, Mark Berger, who's just a wonderful, wonderful man, and worked for Disney. I think he's like connected to SAC. I hear a lot of SAC on your podcast, those folks. I know Megan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she was in the original cast. Megan was in the original cast. And so everybody converged in Minnesota. And God, we lived in this house. And it was like, and remember The Real World, the show The Real World?
Yeah.
It was like that, man. The Real World was on MTV, and we were in Minneapolis living in a house trying to develop chemistry under the gun. We did. It was fun, but the more we rehearsed to empty rooms, and then when they flew us over to Italy and we had to live in a construction site, man, it turned into Lord of the Flies, man. we were we weren't at each other's throats necessarily, but it was like, I can't look at you for another minute. Because, I mean, like, I'm on stage with you 8 hours a day rehearsing improvisation. Oh, God, it was nuts. But we got out there, and the shows were great. And man, it was a cool production to see a cruise ship be built, launched, and sailed across the ocean. That was very cool. So, yeah, we were living just outside of Venice, Italy.
You're home.
Yeah, right.
And they didn't say, you're not Italian enough, get out of here.
Yeah, well, every time I would go to mail stuff home or get my mail, there was this little, because, it was early days of the internet, you'd have to wait in line to get email. And so I would just, go mail my check home or do whatever the hell I was doing in town. And the lady would see I'm in Trieste, Italy, and this woman would see my name and she'd start immediately speaking Italian to me. And I could kind of understand what she's saying, but I'm not Italian enough that I can speak it. And when she realized I couldn't speak Italian, she tisk me, make a face. Oh, God. I was just like, oh, man, I'm a stranger in a strange land. And, yeah, I got smacked out of my roots.
I'm just here to do some improv and my
home. Oh, God. I heard Lauren talking about it. Lauren Pritchard?
Yeah.
Who was somehow, I don't know how this happened, but somehow I directed the cast of The Wonder. Like, they asked me to direct it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's when I worked with Lauren. And she's right. Like, by that time, Disney had us working full time. If you weren't on stage, you were working with the kids on the boat and stuff. And it was almost like prison, like where you're in your stateroom or you're on stage. And other than that, but I mean, it was a really cool gig, made a lot of money. But what was weird was, like, I lost track of the art,
Yeah.
Because it was mainstream. And that was the beginning, I believe. It was one of the beginning things. Of course, there's Whose Line Is It Anyway, right? That was on stage, and ABC and Disney, and I think that's right. Is that right? ABC at least, right?
Right.
And so it was mainstream. You saw it. So it was basically like, do that over here.
Right.
So we're like, okay. And there were rules. That was the thing, man. There were so many rules. The Disney execs would fly into Minneapolis to watch a show. And they'd watch us improvise at 1 PM in an empty theater with made up. And then we'd do showcases at night. I remember that was a thing. And the Disney execs would come and then they'd give us notes. And then we had to incorporate the notes. And it was just, it was weird because it wasn't like the fly by the seat of your pants, just improvise, do cool shit thing. It was, okay, we're getting paid by the man. We gotta do it the way the man says. And so, that's when it started getting weird for me. But then the Brave New Workshop invited me to stay. They said, hey, when your contract's done, would you like to stay? And would you like to do Flanagan's Wake up here? I'm like, yeah. So between Disney boats and during Disney boats rehearsals, I sent down to Chicago to get, scripts and props and things, and we put it up here. So Brave New Workshop produced it up here. So I was doing a little of that. And then we started doing some corporate gigs. I call them $1 million pizza parties, where you customize. We do sketch shows, customized, and then the guy that owned the joint, John, turned to me and said, hey, Phil, that long form you were doing down in Chicago, you think you can do that up here? I'm like, sure. So I started teaching some long form improvisation up here. And I was moving, I was moving and shaking. I was kind of running around town again on my bicycle, doing stuff, but all at the Brave New Workshop, teaching classes, doing Flanagan's Wake, helping produce the main stage shows. I did a main stage Christmas show. But at that time, I was like pushing 40. And I was looking around and I realized I don't really have a foundation. I got nothing going on. I don't have a life. And then the universe put me in my apartment window. I needed an apartment. And I looked out my window and there was my landlady, who was this beautiful woman that's now my wife. I'd rented the apartment and I had everything in like these little compartmental boxes. I was like, okay, this is the lady who rents the apartment. That's who I rent the apartment from. And then one day I just looked out the window and she was in her garden and she was just like checking stuff out. And I was like, that's cool. I'm like, wow, she's really pretty. Wow, she's my age. Whoa. And so, started flirting and talking with her. And God, what is it now? 25 years later, we'll be married 20 years in October. So what I did was I stopped everything. I just pulled away. I got out because I was burning. And what was happening was So I was in the middle of all this cool stuff, but then I started to realize I was the angry artist. And this is my wife's cool energy that I saw that I was like, I want some of that. Like, what's that? And she was just taking every day as it came. And I'm like, oh, that's a lot like improvisation. I'm putting too much pressure on myself. Let me pull back. And so, so I just kind of, and at that time too, there was this stuff happening up here with like, improvisation got really mainstream. And I had this vision of it that was really very early 90s in Chicago. And I kept trying to push that. And I realized, you know what this has done? This has evolved. It's different now.
Yeah.
So I can either be the old crazy guy that says, you should be doing it this way. Or I can just be like, let's let them cook, as the kids say. Right? And so I still have, every once in a while, I'll go out and see a show. I'll sneak in the back and watch some stuff. And there's stuff I really like and stuff I really dislike. And what I really dislike is the cutesy stuff. People who get together and they make a group and they are entertaining each other on stage and they're forgetting the audience.
Yeah.
And so, but instead of like fight it, I just don't go. But then every once in a while I see something cool and I'm like, hey, I want to do that again. And from that, like I was like, well, what if I can talk about it? And that's when I started, messing around on Substack. And I think that's how you found me somehow.
Yeah. Now, even when you were in Chicago, though, there would have been stuff that you saw that you hated, right?
I don't know. Yeah. Because there was stuff like I remember one time I went to see a Sondheim production. And I was just like, I don't get this, man. They're singing, but they're talking, and they're talking, and they're singing. and I don't get that. But, or how about not but, and they had gotten together and rehearsed that sucker, and they had rented the space, and they had committed to doing this, and they rehearsed it. And people liked it. Other people in the room liked it.
Improvised Sondheim or just...
No, Sondheim.
Actual
like
Sondheim.
I would see stuff. Yeah. But okay, I'm gonna get in. I'm gonna put my curmudgeon hat on for a minute. Okay, I'm gonna put my curmudgeon hat on because I want to get this out there. About a month ago, I went to go see a show here in town because I just got a little itch. I'm like, let me see what they're doing. Let me see if they're doing anything cool. And I paid $12 to get in. And if I'd been a real curmudgeon, if I'd have been one of those like guys on the progressive commercials, I'd have said, yeah, I want my money back. Because there was nothing I saw that was new, nothing I saw that was connected, nothing I saw that I even recognized as improvisation. It was cutesy stuff and people yucking up for each other and not at all committed to the work. And I'm not blaming the individuals. I just think it was a systemic thing. It's like, just because you can get 5 people together and say yes and, that doesn't make a show.
Yeah.
That's a workshop. Or when I see people just not connected to the work. That's my thing. Is like, I believe when improvisation is done well, you're connected to the work and the audience is connected to you. And you're putting in work. You're not being cute. I see too much cute.
So when you teach, when you lead workshops in long form, do you focus on Herald or how do you navigate that?
That's a great question because one of the things I'm doing right now, and I'm working with a guy here in town. His name is John Haynes, and he runs Actors Theater at Camp Theater in St. Paul. I told him, I made a declaration, okay? That's what we used to call it up in the Brave New Workshop. The Brave New Workshop, you make a declaration. You come out, you say something, and then somebody says yes and, right? So that's the beginning of a scene, right? You make a declaration. So I made a declaration to John. I'm like, I think I want to get a group of improvisers together, but they got to have some chops. I can't do an intro. I can't do a 1.0 workshop. I want some experienced improvisers. I want to put them in a room. I'll play with them for a while, and then at the end of that process, if we can make it work, I want to do a showcase. And so, to answer your question, what I usually do, and what I did with this group that I started with back in late 90s at the Brave New Workshop, these guys, they were called MCV. You can read about that show on my Substack, shameless plug. It was called The Manwich Project, Smells Like MC. So what we would do is we just do what Dell would do. Get in the room, be in the room, talk about some stuff, try some stuff. And I know that sounds vague, but like, hey, what's going on right now? What are you feeling? What is this? And then, okay, how does this relate to improvisation? And so, well, playing at the top of your intelligence. Okay, let's play with that for a little bit. Explore and heighten. So that was one of the things I learned, a discipline I learned early 90s in Chicago, explore and heighten. You explore something and then heighten it. And when you heighten it, it's absurd. There was a guy, I'm going to forget his name. Darn it. He was one of my instructors at the Second City oh, this is just, don't get old because the brain, and then don't do drugs when you're young because then this is what happens to your brain cells. Geffen? Oh my God. There's probably people that are typing comments right now. You idiot, it's this guy. But this is what he taught me. What I wrote down on a bar napkin. One old lady falls down on an escalator. That's sad. Two old ladies fall down on an escalator. That's tragic. Three old ladies fall down on an escalator. Now it's starting to get funny. Okay, and so that was explore and heighten. You explore, oh, wow, something's happening. Whoa, that's kind of cool. Whoa, now you start exploring into and heighten. Heighten doesn't mean go for the funny, go for the joke. It just means let's see where this can go. And then things happen that are connected that then become funny because maybe it goes to the absurd or it becomes really cool.
Yeah. I feel like I was very lucky. My introduction to improv was as theater. It was the first acting class I had to take at Western Michigan University when I was there. I feel like especially since those years where things were really bubbling and kind of brought it to the consciousness. I don't know if it's peaked, maybe it peaked, but where everybody knew what improv was, but it was always improv comedy, not improvisational theater.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people approach it as comedy, and I think that can lead to the cutesy stuff. We're here to make each other laugh and not we're here to make theater.
Yeah, and I'm more in the theater camp unless it is declared at the beginning that we're going to be doing some short form and hey, he's going to say one word, I'm going to say one word. This is called one word scene,
yeah.
Right? Because then it's like, yuck, yuck, here we go, right? Everybody knows the rules, right?
Yeah.
And also, there's some real value to coming out and saying, hey, we're going to make you laugh tonight.
Yeah.
You know? Because that's what people want, you know, and you step out. And that's the other thing, too. Introductions, man. Ins and outs. Introductions. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Phil. And tonight, this is what we're going to do. Oh, that person knows what they're doing. I feel like I'm being taken care of here in this space as an audience member. I feel like I've paid for something that is well produced. When people step out on stage and go, yeah, we're the funny headshots. Give us a suggestion. It's like, yeah, no.
Get off the stage. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny, too, because like there was this thing where, okay, so the last show I went to go see was here in town, and it was right around Halloween. And the suggestion was great. It's like they say, give us a suggestion of the best Halloween costume you ever had. And I shouted out because it came right to me. It was and damn honest. I said, Baby Jessica.
In the well.
Yeah. And this girl in her 20s, threw her head back and laughed. I was like, oh, cool. I can't believe she knows who Baby Jessica was. I'm like, that's cool because I can tell that person is connected. She connected to Baby Jessica. Because if you're a 20-something now, you don't know who Baby Jessica was. And if you 20-somethings are listening right now, Google it. It's a little girl that fell down in a well in like 87 or 88. Yeah. I was out in L.A.
No longer a baby, we should say.
No, she's doing great. But it was right around Halloween. It was out in L.A. And I took a pillowcase and cut holes for the legs. And then I took it from the People magazine article. She was on a backboard and she had this gauze wrapped around her head when they pulled her out of the well. And I dressed up as Baby Jessica because it was like the zeitgeist. It was like what was happening at the time. And I went, and people were yelling at me like, that's not funny. I'm like, come on, I didn't push her in the well. I'm just, picking up the ball and running with it. And I won like hundreds of dollars in costume contests. But anyway, that's a side story. The point is I'm trying to make with the girl on stage was, I'm like, oh, that's cool. She got it. She knows who Baby Jessica is. And I wasn't trying to challenge her. It just came to me.
Yeah.
I just yelled it out like an audience member because of the story I just told. I'm really connected to, that was my best. That was a really cool Halloween costume. And then what happened, I watched her as she tried to initiate a scene in a well, and then she got bowled over by the boys. The boys all came out and bowled her over. And I got no time for that either. I worked around and with this, you should find Susan. You should interview Susan Messing. You know who Susan Messing is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. I was around her. I mean, she's part of that whole scene in the 90s, And when she teaches workshops, she'll be like, okay, let's see an office scene. And invariably, the women would take the role of secretary and the guys would be the executives. And she goes, stop. Women start being the executives. Guys stop pushing the girls into being secretaries. And that was like the 90s theme. And you saw who came out of that. I mean, hello, Tina Fey, Rachel, all these people. They were not the secretaries, man. They did their thing, man. They moved to the top. And I'm now, what is this, 40 years later? I'm looking, or 40, 30, I don't know. However many years later, I see this poor girl get bowled over on stage, and I'm just like, this ain't the thing, man. This is not what it should be at this point.
Yeah.
So sorry if I'm getting a little curmudgeon-y, but that's why I'm in semi-retirement and thinking about coming back out. So
I've heard it said, one baby falls down a well, it's sad.
yeah, but a guy puts on some cardboard and goes out and wins contests.
Right.
That now it's starting to get funny.
Now it's comedy. Yeah. Yeah, the women that I've interviewed, and it's been far too few, I do like to ask, how they've navigated that, because it does seem to, unfortunately, still in a lot of ways be a boys' club in some places, and it shouldn't be. There's no reason for it. This might still be true. I used to tell my students this. I'd say it's unfair, but for whatever reason, women have to be twice as funny as a man to be seen as equally as funny as that same man, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah,
women are just as funny or more so than men in a lot of situations.
And I had the honor and joy of sharing a stage with Patricia Musker, down in Chicago. One of the probably, I think, the most talented improviser I have known. And I'm not going to say woman, man, just improviser.
Yeah.
Just pure improviser. Holly Wertel, I watched her on stage. And again, it was a thing where anybody who showed up and had chops would get up on stage and do it. And again, I think it was a magic time, because like, if you had chops, you stayed. You got up there, and Del would say 2 people on stage, and the first 2 to jump up would jump. So we had this jump on stage thing. And if you wouldn't be like, sit down, little lady. No, just the first 2 people to jump up. People are people, and we just did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was a cool time. Now, that being said, too, like I'm sure, like I remember one time I got called out. I did a set years ago at this place called Huge Theater in town. I think it shut down. But I was doing a set, and I fell into a traps and opportunities, and I just got lazy. I mean, it'd been a couple years since I improvised, and I jumped up and I did something pretty misogynistic, and I got called on it. And I was like, oh, thank you. This woman's just like, what was that? And I'm like, oh, it was bullshit. You're right. I apologize. Just because if you're not focused, you could fall into bad. We used to talk about it was traps and opportunities. You fall into a trap or you take an opportunity. And then that opportunity was, okay, I fell into a trap. I have an opportunity to be aware of it. Oh boy, wow, careful. You got to keep your skills honed. And that's why, like, I joke that I'm living an improvised life now. I just try to, say yes and to whatever comes my way, and try and add to the scene, honor all my scene partners. My scene partners could be anybody from my wife, who's upstairs right now, to the kid in the grocery store that's helping me out to the car.
Yeah.
These are all I'm in a scene right now in a parking lot. Let me make this kid look good. For me, it's become a way of life, and I didn't know it back then. And I've been trying to extrapolate the best of it, not going for the joke, not trying to be too cute or too smart. Let me just be.
Yeah. That's it for the first part of my interview with Phil. I should mention that Phil is also part of a small trend I've encountered as well. There seems to be a contingent of improvisers who were told at one point that they could never read high school announcements again. I may have to add that question to my list, as I'm sure there are more than just those who've confessed to me on the podcast. Check out Phil's Substack, phillusardi.substack.com, and if you're able to mount Flanagan's Wake, you should. It's a lot of fun. I'll even be producing it locally next year. I'll link to that and to the Substack in the show notes. Come back to hear Phil's response to my Proustian questionnaire and other fun improv tidbits. Thanks for listening.